Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all three past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux taking a look at race number 4 at Santa Anita on Saturday. Fillies and Mares going a mile in the Grade 3 Megahertz. Let's take a peek at this field. Now, we have some wet weather in Southern California, so we'll see how that affects this race. But closing remarks, barring any sort of disaster, is going to go over the $1 million career earnings mark in this race. She's sitting at $9.99.
Yeah, she needs $180 specifically, Dan, to get there. But what a fun mare to watch in her career. I think the big thing for her is the distance. The mile distance works out so well for her. Maybe the concern in here, though, with the shorter field is the pace setup. Is she going to get the pace setup that she needs? That's to be, I guess, decided this weekend. But I still think, she may be just fine knowing that the horse off the long layoff, the 4 might be forward in here. And maybe another runner or two just has to be forward with no one wanting to go. So you never know what happens. But closing remarks, certainly a really hard-knocking mare.
Let's see where Timeform US has these fillies and mares on the pace projector. Oh, it's the dreaded no speed, the gray bar. We're expecting a glacial pace, and maybe Bella Bell. She's going to be fresh. We haven't seen her in a year and a half. Maybe she can get to the front. Now, before the layoff, she was doing some good things, and I just kind of trust Phil D'Amato in these situations.
You have to. I mean, I don't know. And not too many people have the confidence to come back after such a lengthy layoff and go right for the Grade 3, but that's what they're going to do here. And that's really tough. To me, she was forward in like 2 of those 4 starts that we saw stateside. So it is a wild card. But I like that you pointed out the long layoff. Maybe she will be a little bit more keen and eager early on. But it's not too often recently that I've seen that no speed. And I think for several in here, that could be a big concern.
Number 1 is Mufi. This horse returns to the turf. And the last time we saw her on turf, I thought it was a pretty game effort at Ellis Park. It was against weaker competition, but she was sort of in and among horses and then got the split in mid-stretch and looked good the final 16th of a mile or so. Her recent synthetic form is okay. I just think she's better on turf.
I do too. I mean, she's 2 for 2 on the turf, and you look at the number that she got at Ellis Park, it's a pretty lofty one to say the least. And since then, the Ontario matron, talk about one of your favorites up in Canada, Millie Girl wins it. She went on a win streak and won several graded events, and if she wasn't winning them, she was in the money earlier in 2023. So she's a hard-knocking type, and I actually thought, the race at Turfway Park, not a graded race, and maybe the quality wasn't as strong, but that's a tough little series that they have there for those fillies and mares on the Tapeta there. And I think she raced very well. So I'm excited to see her get back on the grass. And I like that she has a fitness edge over a couple in here.
Number 2, Justine's going to be very happy when she walks into the paddock and she doesn't see Ruby Nell. She's tried her the last 2 times. She tried to track her 2 starts back. That didn't work out. Mike Smith decided, well, let's take her back and make one run. And by the time Justique gets going, Ruby Nell is gone. Justique, though, runs well to be second, and at least we've seen some sort of tactical speed from her, where in the beginning of her career, she was kind of a one-run closer. If the pace is very slow, she can be a little closer.
I also think it bodes well for her. She's only had 3 turf starts. I know she's well defeated in this race, but this is her best one. She's gotten a little bit better with each of them. They started her at 6.5. That was on the downhill. Now she's had those 2 tries at a mile. I mean, I think against this group, yeah, there's a couple of others that at least have turf wins and have bigger numbers, but she could still get a share.
Your Want There is up next. Now, this is a mare, according to the Timeform US pace projector, that could be up against it if there's no pace, because she appears to be a one-run closing type. She looked good 3 starts back over course and distance, beating first-level allowance horses. Now she's got to prove she's a graded stakes type in a situation that might not favor her from a race flow standpoint.
No, and last time out, she went a 1 1/8, and she gets beaten by 2 1/4 in that race, and she was dead last. It was a compact field. The pace was not very quick. We know that going to 1 1/8, and there was moisture in the turf course. So part of me goes, okay, I actually like her cutting back to a mile. You look at the efforts 2 and 3 back, but when you go to the race 2 back, there wasn't that much pace, and she still couldn't get the job done. So I think if this is a race where it's paceless, she, as you said, is probably compromised in this spot.
The 4 is Bella Bell, returning off the lengthy layoff for Phil D'Amato. Sure looked good in her first couple of starts in North America, winning the San Clemente at Del Mar, going a mile. She faced tough competition the rest of her 3-year-old campaign, the Del Mar Oaks, the Queen Elizabeth II Cup. Those are major races for 3-year-old fillies on the grass, and she acquitted herself quite well. If she returns at 100% fitness, she might have a pace edge over these horses. Pratt, I think, is going to give her a perfect trip.
Yeah, it's the connections here, the duo that's teaming up. That bodes well for her. You've mentioned it. I mean, look at the race two back. It was won by Spenderella. Now you have to go pretty far back and think about, the quality that she faced, and it was certainly there. I just think in a race like this, even though the barn does really well off the lengthy layoff, we're not talking about 7, 8, 9 months. I mean, it's significantly more than that. And while she could get the pace set up that she needs, is the fitness there yet? I don't know.
Here's the hard-knocking and honest number 5, Oakhurst, coming off a third-place effort in the Grade 3. Robert J. Frankel going a mile and an eighth, and Oakhurst is going to get off the inside here and come with a good solid run to be third. She was completely pace compromised in this race. Angel Nadeshiko had a brilliant front-running jaunt up on the lead. Oakhurst might be pace compromised once again, turning back to a mile. I wonder if she's slightly more effective going a little longer.
She might be. I go down the page though, and I look at some of her efforts, and you go to the race three back. I understand it was a restricted race, but she made up some ground. But her most recent win on the grass was at a mile and an eighth, which kind of alludes to the fact that you had said maybe this is too short for her. But I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do in terms of trip either, because you can go down the page and maybe pick some races where the pace hasn't been too hot, so she has been a little bit more forward. So you wonder if her connections will decide here. Maybe you go. With that said, who's she trained by? Phil D'Amato is are you going to see two stablemates duking it out early? I don't think so.
Nadette stretches out second off the layoff. She was a stakes winner in France earlier in her career, going longer, and she's another one. Doesn't have a lot of early speed, so could be at the mercy of race and pace luck. I thought her La Cienega was okay, however, last time out. Let's take a look at that performance, because she's down on the inside in this race, and she finishes a good solid fourth. I thought her gallop out was okay after the fact. This looked like a really nice prep.
It did, and I think this is actually a really nice performance. She was cutting back significantly in distance. We know some horses handle the downhill well, some don't. But to me, for her cutting back significantly in distance, I thought overall this was a nice kind of return to the races after a bit of a freshening. You'd have to think second time out, she'll be stronger. She's stretching out. And I really like her, but if you have bet her in her last couple, she's always leaving you wanting a little bit more. She's close, but she's not getting it done. So I would just wonder, was that a tune-up like you've said? I think so. But again, it's more interesting when you look at this race, Dan, and you start to go. I mean, 3 horses have starts over the Santa Anita turf course, and they don't have wins, and she's one of them.
Closing Remarks has had a lot of success at Santa Anita in the past, including a win over a course and distance in the Goldacova 2 starts back. I thought her matriarch was a lot better than it looks on paper. She was sort of in and among horses most of the way, had to dive down to the inside, got to follow Surge Capacity, the eventual winner, on the rail, but was always over and behind horses. Looked good on the gallop out. I love that they're bringing her back to try to make her a millionaire, and I think she could have another good season.
I think so too. And I think if you look at the way she's been managed for a while, they just had her as a miler. Then they stretched her out in distance, and a mile and a 16th, she got a win, a mile and an eighth. Then they pushed it a little bit. I think the mile and a quarter is where they said, I can't do that. She can't go that far. And in those efforts since then, I like that she's picked up a win. And as a return to a mile, we know the matriarch was a tough race. I think, her going to the shelf and coming back, she should be fine, fresh off the layoff. She was able to do that in the past. Why not again?
Let's take a look at our top selections for the Megahertz. And Closing Remarks just simply is the horse to beat. She's the class in the field. I'm a little bit concerned about the lack of pace in the race. I think Bella Bell's going to give a good account. You have the 6 in there, Nadette. And I think at a price, she's one that could spice up the exotics.
I think so too. And, I agree. I mean, this race is really challenging, to handicap because of the lack of pace on paper. You can't even see, 2 or maybe 3 horses. I mean, you're kind of counting on that the 4 is probably going to go, but I do think you will start to look at others and see if maybe they'll be a little bit more forward. I wonder if the horse on the rail, Moofy, might be a little bit more forwardly placed just with the draw as well and taking a slight cutback in distance. So hopefully, with it being a compact field, we don't see this get to be a strung out field early on, and Closing Remarks gets the trip. But I agree. I think the number 6, Nadette, she's always been intriguing to me. I know I haven't been able to cash her in terms of winners yet, but I do think stretching back out on distance, second off, she should be strong.
Hoping the weather holds up as Closing Remarks bids to become a millionaire in the Megahertz.